So my name is Karen-Charmaine Villegas. My parents are Ray Malabuyak and Elizabeth Villegas. I'm born here in Montreal. My parents are from Santo Tomas, Batangas. I'm a fashion designer and also work at Air Canada part-time and also do film part-time and yeah. I just know that my grandmother was here first and brought all her kids here. So my mom was actually here and then they got married a year after and she brought my dad here to Canada. I think the problem was more dealing with a baby as them being babies than really adjusting to being in Canada. Filipino activities. I think the only thing I can think at the top of my head is like dancing at Hatao back in the days. But other than that, I've never really been super involved in the Filipino community, except for my grandma being in part of FAMAS. We used to dance as kids, so that's pretty much it.
Dance as kids.
Filipino dances. I don't know how to call it, but it's like the Filipino dances when we were kids. Before, I was ashamed of being Filipino. I don't think a lot of people know this about me, but I used to be really ashamed of being Filipino. I think when we first started, like with the internet and stuff, we were proud and right, like flip_angel and stuff like that. Like my email was like baby angel, but then on my like nicknames, I would always write like flip something. But then as time went by and I started meeting new people on social media, and like I don't know why ethnicity was such a thing, like with Asian Town and everything. Like I was telling them I was Filipino, but then going into school, high school, college, I was kind of like, and all the like kind of bullying that I went through with it, I was kind of ashamed of it. And I was ashamed of the fact that like Filipinos talk so much, there's so much chismis, so I didn't want to associate myself again. But now I'm not that super proud, but I'm happy that I can speak the language.
Biggest challenge being Filipino Canadian?
Biggest challenge being Filipino Canadian. I don't actually feel like I have such a struggle being Filipino Canadian, whether it's work or anything. I didn't feel like I was challenged because I was Filipino. Because I'm born here, it's like they kind of treat me like Canadians. But I mean, personal relationships, like there's a struggle between that if you're like they start making racist jokes, but besides that I never felt a challenge in general. I think I'm reminded often, maybe not that I'm Filipino, but more that I'm Asian. I think a lot of people always like feel the need to mention or like that I'm Asian, that I'm different from them, or they always mention like, they always make like racist jokes like, oh, your eyes, can you see, and stuff like that. And I think it happens actually probably weekly. I think it happens so often that I actually almost forget that it happens. I'm getting older and I'm realizing people are just ignorant. So I'm just, it doesn't bother me as much as when I was younger. I used to hate people calling me like, oh, you're Chinese, oh, you're this, and like I'm like, oh my god. And I used to kind of hate being Asian, but now I'm just like, whatever, that's who I am. Sure. I'm like, sure. Not that I was like racist of my own race, but because I never wanted to associate myself as a fob. And a lot of people make jokes about it with me because they know I'm conceived in the Philippines. So for them, I still kind of count as a fob. And my mom came here to Canada when she was 8 months pregnant. So I was basically in the Philippines most of the time, in her belly. And when people would be like, oh, you're a fob, like they used to kind of associate that as a bad thing, that I was like, oh my god, like I don't want to be a fob. Because the way that they said it was like, oh, you're a fob. And like, if you're making fun of you for being a fob, then why would you be proud of saying like, oh yeah, like I'm a fob?
Do you feel isolated in your neighborhood?
No, not at all.
Where do you live?
I live in Cotanej, where all the Filipinos are. Well, most of the Filipinos are. It's funny because it's usually Filipinos who make fun of me.
That's fucked up.
it's like Filipinos are like, oh, you're a fob though. Like, like you're not a real Canadian because like you were in your mom's stomach for most of the time in the Philippines. But like they made it sound so bad, so I was like, no, I'm not a fob. Like I was so defensive about it. I can't remember a memory where I'm like actually super proud of being Filipino, so maybe I'll skip that. But ashamed, it used to happen a lot when I was a teenager, or I would like tell people, no, I'm not Filipino, or like actually deny it. I'm just like, oh, I'm a mix something, and people are ignorant, just believe me, because like whatever. But I used to be ashamed because I know people always talk about how like Filipinos are just like kind of like house cleaners, or like we're just nurses, and I didn't want to kind of associate myself with that, so I just like kind of brush it off. Before CJIP, I was in Ottawa for 2 years, so I kind of over there. I kind of almost embraced that I was Filipino because I was I was the only one. I was the only Filipino, so I'm like, oh, I'm special. Like here, I'm special. But in Montreal, because we're in where I live, there's so many Filipinos that I kind of just blend in. But when I was in Ottawa, I felt special because I was the only one. And then when I came back for college, I don't know how I felt. I guess I felt kind of neutral about it. I kind of started to accept it more. I was maybe not proud of it, but less ashamed. Not favorite tradition, but I guess about Filipinos, my favorite thing is the togetherness. Like we like to be together. We like family stuff. Like despite all the family drama, I think there's always that sense of like, but we need to be together on occasion and stuff like that. I think that's something that's important because I've met a lot of people who don't have big families, and it's like for me it's so normal to have a big family and always be together, that when I met people who don't have big families and who aren't Filipinos, it made me embrace the fact that, oh, we are actually always together. Yeah. I never really knew why, but I never really liked talking about religion. I think it's such a sensitive subject that I never really wanted to engage in that conversation. Because every time we have that conversation, there's always an argument. There's always people like, so always going to be someone who's closed-minded. So I just like, you know what, I'm just going to like shut that off completely and not talk about religion. I feel like catechism was more like, I guess as a kid, you see it more as like a chore because your parents kind of force you into it. Like, oh, you have to do this because that's what they said to do. Like, oh, if you want to, what my mom said was like, she put in my head that if I wanted to get married, I needed to do my catechism classes. So I'm just like, oh, okay, well, it's something that's normal. Like, I have to do it. So I just did it. But it felt like just like a second school, pretty much. Oh, my heart. I think it is important. I guess it's not like super important, but I think it's important in a way that I think it's important for me to teach my kids Tagalog, and it's important because I need them to also communicate with my big family. And a lot of my families have hard time with like English. I mean, they speak English, but I mean, it's a lot easier to communicate in Tagalog, obviously. So I think that'd be a big part of why I would pass that on to my children. I used to be ashamed of speaking Tagalog. Now I'm like, oh my God, I'm trilingual. Like that's like such a cool thing here. I do still have family in the Philippines, and I do have them on Facebook. I have like, you know, we like each other's posts and stuff, but like that's as far as it goes. I don't have conversation with them. It's almost like I don't like to say that, but it's like almost like they're strangers to me. Like I'll hear about them with the family, but other than that, I don't talk to them at all. I do know about the struggles because my family talks about it a lot. Like every time I go see like my grandma, for example, there's always a story about our family in the Philippines, or like the drama with the houses and all that stuff in the Philippines. And so it's always a bad thing. Like every time we go to a family and we hear about our family in the Philippines, it's always like bad news. Like there's another problem going on. Oh, they need money for this or they need money for that, and they're struggling all the time. So I think besides talking about religion with my dad, I think I'm pretty open with my parents. My parents and I are we have a close relationship. So I'm pretty open about talking about things. I mean, obviously I'm not going to talk about like very intimate things, but in general we're very open. So I have no problem with that. I don't know how, but I think we should work more on actually working as a community instead of as just togetherness within the family. I think it's important to just bring everybody else together. I never thought about it before, but like being part of the Filipino project with you and then like with Sherry, it's making me think maybe I should, like our generation's inputs are very important, and I see how like seeing other people's interviews, like listening to everybody's opinion about the Filipino community, it made me realize we are in need of that. I don't see myself as a leader in that sense to start something, but I think if the people around me are doing something to help the Filipino community or anything, I think I would participate like I am now. Yeah, I don't think they're ready. I think we're just starting. Like I said, I think we're just starting to be aware. We will be ready soon, but I think we need to address the problem before fixing it. And I think we're starting to do that now. So, in time. I feel like it's kind of hard, like with the people who are in charge of the Filipino community right now, because like the old generations, they're a bit more, I don't want to say closed-minded, but closed-minded. So I feel like it's kind of hard to reach out. Like you come out there and they kind of look at you like, well, what is this kid trying to do? Like, why are you trying to change anything that's like, because they don't see anything wrong with our community right now. So why would they want to welcome another generation in to change something? Like they don't want to change something that they don't see anything wrong with. So I feel like it would be hard to. Not that I wouldn't try, but I think it'd be hard. So I feel kind of like pulled aback from like wanting to approach them. I think I wanted to answer these questions because I realized after seeing the other interviews that it kind of illuminated what I felt about being Filipino, and talking about it made me realize I'm like actually kind of like it made me realize who I was. Like it made me realize that I actually kind of like it now. I'm always proud. I'm like, yeah, I'm trilingual. I can speak Tagalog, English, and French, and like not a lot of people could say that about themselves. So I wanted to answer those questions because it really helped me see who I was. Be okay with who you are. I guess just accept it, because you can't really change who you are. Like, I mean, you could lie about it and other people could believe you, but in the end I think you just have no choice but to accept it. I don't know anything about Filipinos and politics. I don't even follow politics here in Montreal. So I'm very ignorant, to say the least. I don't know anything about politics. Yeah.
That's a wrap.
The one I used to run and talk to when me and my girl was having
That's
problems.
the move.